So DMT, in terms of its subjective effects, is reported to be very rich in content, as you say. People literally see stuff. It's very immersive. I've heard it described as almost like an extremely compelling and extremely bizarre virtual reality experience. Can you talk a little bit more about the common threads that come out of people's reports of the subjective effects, just so that we can sort of paint a picture to the best of our ability of what the subjective effects are for people that haven't experienced it? And I want to do that before we get into brain stuff. So it's very fast acting. There's lots of content. It's very compelling content, whatever exactly that means. And there's a lot going on in the DMT experience. Are there any common themes to the visual aspects of the subjective experience that tend to come out in reports?
What we found in our research is that the experience, you can think of experience from a structural perspective or a content perspective. From a structural perspective, we mapped out that this experience has it involves the body, the visual sort of perception, and emotional contents. Broadly speaking, these are the three main structural domains that are affected. What we find that it's a reliable aspect of the experience when we give it intravenously is that people have this, at the beginning of the experience, a strong sense of energy, bodily rush happening in their bodies. Many people who have other sort of experiences with yoga and Kundalini and things of the sort liken it to a form of Kundalini sort of rush awakening, an energy transversing the body that has carries a sense of edge and a sense of also deep meaning. After that, people have that's immersive visual quality experience. So they go through what some people call this breakthrough DMT experience, which they're no longer seeing some geometrical patterns which you encounter with other sort of psychedelic drugs, but they're now breaking through into what seems like different reality or dimension. This is when you give high enough doses to people. And while they're having this experience of breaking through into this different sort of realm, at the same time, the body kind of like goes away into the background. People, while at the beginning had this strong sense of rush in their body, no longer feel their body's present. Some people feel they're having an out-of-body sort of experience, not necessarily looking into their bodies, but in a way feeling that their experience is no longer anchored to their body state. Which, when you think about it, is curiously similar to the experience of dreaming. You're having a very visually engaging experience that can have a fantastical character to it, but you're no longer attached to your body and your environmental signals. So it's a virtual reality experience. And then after this strong sort of breaking through into the space subsides after a couple of minutes, people start coming back and making sense of what happened, integrating the experience, if you will. And in that integration, emotional content starts to arise, kind of like taking in the messages that they got from that experience and how it reflects in their relationships, in their own lives, in their notions of spirituality, in their notions of reality sometimes, etc. So these are some of the features. And another, I think, within that, I kind of mentioned it, is that when people have high enough doses of NN-DMT, they can have what is this called sometimes as this ontological shock reaction or experience, that the experience feels more real than real. It seems to carry some sort of authority in terms of the contents that it's providing, the teaching, and that has something to do with the nature of reality. And that can change people's worldviews as well in a significant fashion after the fact.
Do people, when they have a DMT experience under controlled conditions, do they normally look back on it in a positive light, in a negative light, a mix of both? Is there any commonality to whether or not people are evaluating the experience as a good one, a bad one, or neutral?
It depends very much on what we call the setting, the intention people might have, and so on. How well they are prepared psychologically to have that experience. In the context of ayahuasca, DMT is a big part of ayahuasca. It's not the whole thing, but it is a big part of that. In the context of ayahuasca, many people find a lot of meaningful experiences in that. And the setting of ayahuasca can be a culturally rich setting. There's a lot of songs, there's rituals, and it's also a longer experience. And a lot of people find a positive effect out of that experience. With DMT, when it's given on its own, let's say in a lab setting, like you said, injected, the experience can be very fast and can be a bit overwhelming. So again, depending on the level of preparation that the person has, that can be a satisfying experience. Some people can find it even pleasurable, like in terms of a sensual sort of pleasure that they get out of the experience. Many times we've seen that people provide a very strong sense of aesthetics, a sense of beauty, of appreciating the beauty of the experience in a way that they hadn't done so for many times, for a long time before that. So just the experience of beauty as having an inherently healing quality to some extent. Just a thing that doesn't get talked to very much, which I find particularly interesting. And sometimes challenging experiences. So sometimes people can have overwhelming experiences in which they struggle. It's not that they struggle with the experience in terms of how did this fit, but it can be scary. The encounters with beings can provide a sense of realness that is a bit sometimes overwhelming for the person. Nonetheless, also in some of those occasions, those challenging experiences can be fruitful for the person if it's somehow dealt in the right way. But yeah, it's varied for sure, and very much depending on the level of readiness that the person has.